Hey guys, LevelCap here, and today I want to take a look at the new PlayerUnknown's Battleground map, Karakin, and the cool features recently added to the game. When PUBG Beta launched back in 2017, it redefined what we think of when it comes to competitive online gaming. The Battle Royale genre was popularized and the FPS world forever changed. However, PUBG was a weird game. It was buggy, had many clunky mechanics, and somewhat unfinished design concepts. The game's pacing was incredibly slow, which made it a very divisive game. Over 2 years later, we now have a game that's received a lot of AAA development treatment, but still remains true to its roots of realistic weapon mechanics and having some of the highest skill requirements. Now with the new map Karakin, for the first time, I feel like the developers went in the design direction I had always wanted them to go. The size of the map is only 2 by 2 kilometers, making it the smallest map ever added to the game. For comparison, Sanhok is 4 by 4 kilometers and Erangel is 8 by 8 kilometers. That means the playable area of Karakin is approximately 1/16 the size of the original map, not even the size of Erangel's military island. Towns and more complex buildings are mostly located around the perimeter of the map, so once the circle begins to close in, a lot of the combat takes place in the rugged desert mountains toward the center. There's also a new feature called the Black Zone, which basically takes the place of a red zone. The Black Zone is essentially what the red zone should have always been. It's an artillery strike that completely destroys any building that it hits. This will not only kill any players inside that building, but they will also be totally unrevivable, so you absolutely want to move out of the zone when it appears. Otherwise, you're going to be playing Russian roulette with your life. The destruction effects actually look pretty cool, and after the strike is over, the ruins of the buildings provide a different type of cover layout, and there's also some loot to be found inside. The area of the black zone is much smaller than the red zone, but if you're in it, the chances of getting hit seem to be much higher, and it actually causes players to move out of the zone instead of taking cover in buildings. This was actually the original purpose of the red zone, but ironically it had the exact opposite effect. It would be really interesting to see if the devs ultimately plan to replace the other red zones with the black zone on the other maps. However, for the update post, it seems to indicate that this is going to be a Karakin exclusive, at least for the time being. Also, it would mean that a lot of buildings would need to be redesigned or reanimated with destruction in mind for any of the other maps, so it certainly wouldn't be a small task. Now, many of the buildings on the new map are much more simplistic in design, leaving less camp spots, especially once the circle begins to shrink and there's less buildings within the circle. They've also implemented the feature of breakable walls, where explosives can be used to open up holes for new entry points into buildings or even underground tunnels. The new sticky bomb located around the map will let you gain access to these areas. Often the best loot can be found by gaining access to sealed off compartments. Also, the buildings feature many walls that can be shot through, creating new interesting interior fight mechanics. Not only is there bullet penetration, but holes can be created for sneaky firing angles, similar to Rainbow Six. Luckily, these walls aren't everywhere, otherwise it would be super exploitable. Can you imagine trying to run through a map where every wall has some sort of little sniper hole in it? That would just be an absolute nightmare. There's also an extensive bunker system on the map, often found in the dome-like huts. The red flagged huts indicate a cave system below, and using explosives to gain access usually means you're going to find some of the better loot in the game. However, the caves are often connected to multiple access points, so don't be surprised to find other groups down there already. This definitely happened to me a couple times where I'm looting, excited about all the great stuff I'm finding, and then all of a sudden I look up to see another team of players pointing their guns at me. It didn't end well. Now, if you're not actively seeking secured looting areas, you will likely have some underwhelming loot come endgame. It's possible the devs are tweaking the loot tables right now for the final public release. That being said, because of the size of the map, having a sniper rifle might not be as big of a necessity as it could have been on other maps. The extremely rugged terrain allows for a lot of movement and sneaking around, so don't be surprised if enemies seem to come out of nowhere. Not to mention the tunnel system, once learned, will provide a lot of sneaky ambush opportunities. Once this map goes live for public to help with queue times, Karakin will be replacing Vikendi in the map cycle. Vikendi will still be available in private games, but it's clear that too many maps will lengthen the queue times and reduce the overall player experience. So they had to get rid of something, and I think they're finding that, 4 maps is probably the limit, and if the player base starts to reduce, they might have to reduce the map limit to 3 to again have decent queue times. Nobody wants to be sitting around for 5 minutes waiting for a game to start. Now, personally, I really like this map and the overall design direction. I remember when Miramar, the second map, first launched, and I was thinking, wait, they made a bigger map than Erangel? As if pacing wasn't slow enough in the original map, they went and made bigger cities and larger playable areas. Why? It seems so weird to me, since some of the top feedback about PUBG initially was the pacing, and then they made it even slower paced. Karakin seems like it may be a response to the popularity of faster-paced battle royale games. You can avoid a combat drop in Karakin if you're smart about it, but landing in a city almost guarantees an early game firefight, and even going toward the middle map cave system is extremely dangerous. The days of looting for 10 to 15 minutes without seeing any action are going to be mostly gone, and I like that a lot. Also, the size of the map means that vehicles are not really needed here. And as much fun as it can be to have those crazy vehicle-based firefights, I really don't miss needing to find a vehicle to outrun the blue circle. Far less deaths should be happening due to circle damage, since it's much more easily avoided now. This means more players killing players versus environment killing players. And sure, the black zone is technically more lethal than the red zone, but as soon as everyone figures that out, there should be far less deaths and more player movement as a result. Coming back to PUBG after a long hiatus was really nice. The performance is certainly better, though I'm playing on better hardware now. Many UI elements have been cleaned up and improved. Random players are often willing to make good callouts and chat it up over VoIP. The latency seems a bit off, but I think that was mostly due to test server issues. I kept running into Russian players, British players, and even Australian players, so God knows how bad the pings were in the test server experience. And generally speaking, it seems like for the first time in a while, the game is going in the direction that I wanted it to go back in 2017. In fact, the reason I stopped playing PUBG was largely due to pacing reasons. Not seeing combat for 10 minutes and then dying to somebody hiding in a bathroom just made me rage. And although there will undoubtedly be some of that on Karakin, it just doesn't seem like there's enough time for that level of camping. Again, most of the endgame combat I had was outside in the open, so not many situations where one team has a building and the other doesn't. It was mostly, how are we going to push up over this mountain ridge or move around this set of hills or try and get to that little bit of cover over there. Less building fighting, less breaching buildings was necessary. And that's good because I've also felt that PUBG's building fighting has been some of the weaker elements of the game. The mechanics have always seemed to be a little bit clunky, not having bullet penetration before, not having destructible walls and stuff like that, always made things very choke pointy, very campy, and just not as well designed. So less building combat, especially in endgame, is a big improvement in my personal opinion. And speaking of personal opinions, PUBG is a complicated game with many different driving factors as to why people want to play it. But Karakin feels like it's finally catering itself to players like me, who care more about pacing than they do about lengthy looting experiences. That certainly seems to be trending with some of the other popular battle royales as well. Speeding up the looting process, making it easier, and focusing a bit more on the combat, flanking enemy players, and whatnot. So we'll see if that becomes more of a driving factor in PUBG's future. I plan to play this a bit more once it comes out on the public servers. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications, leave me a like if you want, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.